Welcome and thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. I'm Kylie Timler with Kirkwood Corporate Training. Today we have Joel Bennett joining us to present a preview of his upcoming flexible and innovative training presentation on building trust. This presentation in its entirety will be on January 27th, and that will be offered via Zoom. So you can join us virtually on that day. After today's presentation, if you'd like to learn more about Joel's session and how to attend, or if you'd like to bring Joel in-house, you can just give us a call at corporate training at 319-398-5623, or you can email us at corporatetraining@kirkwood.edu. I just want to take a brief moment here and introduce today's presenter. Joel Bennett is the owner and lead consultant of Veel Holding Consulting. Joel has over 20 years of human resources experience, and he builds improved organizational capacity by providing customized consulting, training, and coaching services that are growth focused for businesses. His expertise in leadership and organizational development, performance management, and change management allow him to assist leaders in taking challenging personnel and organizational issues. By tackling those challenging personnel organizational issues, I should say. I want to remind everyone that throughout today's presentation, if you have something that's just really resonating with you, feel free to just drop a comment in that chat box. Or if you have a question that you would like Joel to answer, we will be doing a live Q&A after today's session for our Zoom users. So feel free to go ahead and drop that in that chat box, and I can ask Joel at the end of today's presentation. So Joel, thank you so much for joining us, and whenever you would like to get started, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks, Kylie. Thanks for having me. It's great to be a part of this process. I have a lot of respect for what Kirkwood does through their webinar series, and can be a great resource for businesses. So today's topic is about building trust, and as Kylie mentioned, we're going to just be doing a segment of this. And if you're interested in the full version, we'll be doing that in January. But I think we can all understand the importance of building trust, both in our personal relationships, and more specifically today, we'll focus on professional relationships. And I think we understand that without trust, our relationships begin to crumble, and trust becomes an important component to almost everything that we do. So with that in mind, I think it's important for us to understand the basis for this. So in the full version, we would talk about the 13 trust behaviors that contribute to creating trust with others. And today we'll only have time to discuss 5 of these in brief, but I hope you'll come back in January for the deeper dive on each. So while trust is universal, and it can be applied on both the personal and professional realms, it's important for us to understand how to build it within the teams. And so for most of the part of today, I want to focus on the workplace, but I think you'll see that some of these overlap quite nicely into your personal realm as well. So the 5 that we're going to cover today are demonstrating respect, clarifying expectations, talking straight, keeping commitments, and righting wrongs. And so as Kylie mentioned, I would love, if you're having any ahas or if you have experience to share, feel free to drop that in the chat, of course, with your questions as well. So let's start with demonstrating respect. Respect is a word that gets thrown around a lot in the workplace. And I think with all the changes that we've seen in the last 18 months, companies are recognizing that they need to create environments where respect is important, because people come from different backgrounds, people have different philosophies and ideas. And so what are the ways that we can demonstrate respect for others within the workplace to build trust? And so the first one I would throw out there is being genuine. And being genuine is all about being authentic and helping people understand that you care, right? And they should know that you care. And if we're not being genuine, if we're not being authentic, people can see through that pretty quickly. And so part of being respectful is being genuine, not having anything that's hidden. The second part of this is helping people understand their importance and clarifying that to them. How do they matter to you? And how do they fit into the bigger picture? Overall, just why do they matter, right? And so the impact of their work on the team, the impact of their work on the company, or the impact that they have specifically on you. And again, sometimes when we do this, we make it about us. That's not the important part. If we want to demonstrate respect, we need to help them understand why they're important and where they fit into the big picture. The third piece here is showing kindness and grace. We need to understand that people are people. They're people first. They are not a position within the organization. They are not a kind of a cog in the wheel. They're people, and people bring people stuff to work. And so what we need to be thinking about in this process is being able to show some kindness and grace through problems, through issues, through bumps on the roads, and consider people's intent over their actions. Now, what's interesting about this is we typically judge ourselves on our intent, but we tend to judge other people based on their actions. And so sometimes people have a great intent, they have good intentions, but the way that they show it may not necessarily match up with how we would, or we don't completely understand the situation. And so we need to be thinking about the fact that they're people, that we need to give people respect before it's earned. That can sometimes go against kind of general wisdom that you have to earn my respect. But I think it's better to actually start from, I'm going to show you respect until you prove me wrong. And when there are issues with kindness and grace is to show some forgiveness through that process. The last one here is to help them be successful. And quite often when I'm coaching leaders within organizations, whether they're new or experienced leaders, when we talk about things like performance or where there may be issues within a team, I coach them very heavily on starting those interactions with, I want you to be successful. When I start a conversation with, I want you to be successful, so I'm going to give you this feedback, or so I'm going to coach you through this, it sets the stage differently for the listener. And so if they know that you want them to be successful, and that's why you're bringing this up, or that's why the interaction is happening, they start from a different place. They recognize that this could be for their benefit. It also helps you, though. And so we're going to talk about kind of stepping into some hard stuff in here in a few slides. But if you have to go into a situation and you start the conversation with, I want you to be successful, it changes your mindset as well. You're not there to be the principal or to catch somebody doing something wrong or to be the bad guy. What you're there to do is to help them be successful. And so by starting with that mindset and thinking about what you can do to help them, it demonstrates respect to them, and it sets the stage for a more respectful conversation. So again, as we go through, if there's anything that resonates for you in each of these 5, I'd love to see that in the chat. Or if you have any experience where being genuine, clarifying people's importance, showing kindness and grace, or helping them be successful has been something that you're able to do to build more trust in your workplace. So the second one of the 13 we're going to cover today is clarifying expectations. And we do a lot of work with new leaders and with teams in general around making sure their communication is clear. And specific to the communication is the expectations that we have for where we're going, why we're going there, and how we'll get there. And so we typically say to begin with, you need to set expectations. And I think we've all been in situations where if expectations weren't clear and people don't understand where we're going and why we're going there and how we're going to get there, all of a sudden, not only do we start on the wrong note, but we have people going in different directions, which can cause both issues within the teams from a performance standpoint, but it also starts to erode trust because it feels like everybody's kind of doing their own thing. So how do we set very clear expectations up front? The second piece around clarifying expectations to build trust is to make sure that this is a discussion, right? It's a two-way conversation. It's not a lecture. So if you're the leader of a team or a project leader, a manager, maybe even a coworker, it's about setting expectations, but having a conversation around that. And if you're doing all the talking and you're not doing any listening, there's a good chance that there's going to be some miscommunication that's happening. And so what we need to do next is to clarify expectations. And so if this expectations that you've set and during the discussion, you realize that not everybody's on board or has the same understanding as you, it's important that we go back and clarify. And the great way to do this is really simple. It's to ask, what questions do you have? Now, that seems extremely simple, but it's different than the question that we typically ask, which is, do you have any questions? And the reason why I paint a very different picture between the two is when I say, do you have any questions? The only two answers that are out there are yes and no. But the inferred answer is no. And because if I ask if you have questions, if you have questions, it may mean that you don't understand, or that you're not sharp enough to pick things up the first time. But if I say, what questions do you have? I'm inferring that I'm expecting some. And by doing that, I open up a conversation around what could be issues or questions or concerns that would not have been raised elsewhere. And so asking it in that way, what questions do you have, helps us clarify the situation and open up communication lines. The next step is confirm. So confirm that they understand your expectations. And so even asking them to confirm their understanding of it. And so I may go through and explain one of the reasons why the company may be changing their work at home policy, or maybe it's an important change toward the end of the year on how we're going to do business. I want to make sure that people understand that clearly enough that they can actually share it with somebody else and the message is the same. And so sometimes just asking people, hey, if you had to explain this to somebody else, what do you think the high points are? Or if you had to explain it to me, how would you explain it? Now, we do this in a way that we're working with adults, so don't treat people like a kid, but we want to make sure that we know that they understand. If not, we need to go back and clarify. And the last step is pretty simple. We want to make sure that we get a commitment. And so once we have expectations, it's really about being able to depend on them to do it. And so sometimes that's where I'll start is, hey, now that we've gone through it, I know that we've clarified your expectations, you've confirmed you get it. Can I depend on you to do this, right? And when a person has to answer that question, it typically changes their approach, right? Because if the answer would be no, I'm not going to commit to do it, it takes us back to discussion and clarification. But if it's yes, I'm making a commitment, I'm making a promise. And so I typically will follow through. The third piece we'll talk about today is talking straight. And talking straight, in other words, making sure the message that they need to hear is what we deliver. And so first off, tell the truth. And this may on the top level feel like just an honesty piece. But what I really mean about this is if there's something that you need to work through, have a conversation about, a discussion about, don't sugarcoat it. When we sugarcoat things, that's for you, it's not for them. That's because of your discomfort. And what you're doing, if I want them to be successful, if I truly believe that, they can't be successful if I'm not clear. They can't be successful if I'm not 100% honest. Now, the way that I do that, I don't have to be a jerk about it. I don't have to kind of ram it down their throat. But at the end of the conversation, they should understand my position and why I'm bringing that forward. And there shouldn't be any hidden intentions. The second piece is we need to demonstrate integrity. And integrity is all about saying what you mean and doing what you say. And taking that even a step further, it's following through even when it's hard. Integrity is something that we throw around a lot, and we'll talk about this in the next slide as well. But I think when we talk about integrity, where we start to lose trust in the workplace is when someone says something and then they turn around and do something very different. One example I give quite often in our leadership training is we make some small promises, some small commitments every day. Things like somebody sends you an email message and has a bunch of questions and asks if you can swing by their desk to talk with them, and you respond back very quickly, yep, I'll come by later, and then you never do, right? That may seem like a small thing, but trust is an interesting thing. It's not something that we can make, Covey talks a lot about the trust bank and making deposits and withdrawals. Trust is not something you can make huge deposits on, but we can take huge withdrawals based on situations. And so demonstrating integrity, it may feel like we're depositing pennies or dimes, or maybe even dollars, but over time, that starts to compound, and the trust that we have with people is very important. And so being able to build that day by day by demonstrating integrity is a big piece. And the last piece here is clear is kind. Brene Brown can take credit for this. If you've read any of Brene's books, they're fantastic. She talks a lot about vulnerability and trust. But her phrase here, clear is kind, is about being direct, but being compassionate, right? Again, seeing people as a person, but understanding if I'm not absolutely clear, I'm actually setting them up for failure, not success. And if we go back to, I want you to be successful, I need to make sure that I'm telling the truth. I'm not sugarcoating. I'm demonstrating integrity in what I say is what I'm actually going to do. And the last piece is that I'm being as clear as possible, because that is what's kind. And then the last one here, keeping commitments. And so keeping commitments starts with stating your intent. And in this, if you remember what I said earlier, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge other by actions. If we think about that and flip it, when we work on a team with a manager, even with a customer, if we're unclear as to our intent, they're going to infer their own intentions from what we do. So we need to start with what is our why, right? And what our why is in this case is why am I deriving certain thoughts or mindsets in the conversation that we're having? How am I approaching the situation? What do I think the real problem is? And what do I want to do about it? And so if I start with clarifying my intentions, even when my actions may not show that as clearly, people will understand where I'm coming from, and then at least we can have a conversation about what that should look like going forward. In keeping our commitments, we need to, again, do what we say we're going to do. And so once they understand our intent, we need to act accordingly. And if they have opinions on how that should look, we need to listen to them and see if there are ways that we could compromise. Again, sometimes the way that we would operate, the way we would do business is not the way that other people would. And so when we're leading, regardless of what role that we're in, we need to be clear on what our intentions are, ask for people's thoughts, ideas, and if they have concerns. And then if we can make compromise, great. If not, we need to be clear on what our plan is and why we're moving forward in that way. Because there are going to be times where the actions you take, what you're going to do as a result, won't always match what others expect or would do for themselves. But if there is a reason for that, and you have a clear methodology, a clear mentality around it, making sure that they're aware of it is big in building their trust, even when you may not agree. And then the last piece here is don't break confidence. And so we need to understand it's a little bit like the Vegas rule, right? What happens within a conversation stays there unless you agree to bring others in. And so if I am having a discussion with a coworker and I'm trying to build trust and we talk about commitments and things are shared within that conversation that probably shouldn't be shared elsewhere, then I'm not going to share it elsewhere. And unless you could come to an agreement of, hey, I think we need to bring Susan in on this to get a different perspective, that should stay with you, right? The flip side of this is maybe the conversation wasn't between the person you have a problem with, but we tend to do things like, let me go grab John and I'm going to talk to John about all the ways that Susan broke trust with me, or the things that she did that I didn't agree with. And so in keeping our commitments, part of it is recognizing that if I have an issue with someone, I'm going to work through it with that someone, not with somebody else, right? And when we do that behind people's backs, it actually erodes trust, and in some situations completely loses trust between team members. And so the last of the 5 that we're going to cover today is righting wrongs. And so a big part of righting wrongs is owning your stuff. And what I mean by this is we've all made mistakes. We've all taken actions that afterwards we regret. We've said things that we wish we had never said or wish we had said differently. And so owning your stuff is about taking responsibility and ownership. We, in our programs, talk a lot about the accountability or the empowerment ladder. You may be familiar with that. But this whole piece of working above the line or below the line, the difference is whether or not I see myself as a victim, that stuff happens to me and I'm not responsible for that, or if I see myself as a victor, in that when there is a problem, when I create a problem, I own it and I'm going to do something about it. The difference between things happen to me and I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to change things for the better. And so taking on that victor mentality, we need to understand that we can't hold other people accountable. It's something that we say quite often, but the truth of the matter is we can only hold ourselves accountable. And so when we've fallen short, or when we have a piece in the process that's not working like it should in our interactions with the team, is to own our stuff and call a spade and take the action needed to improve it. The other piece is when we make a mistake, we apologize, right? All of us make missteps, mistakes. Maybe we came across wrong. Saying sorry and meaning it is the first step to starting to build trust again. There in the 80s and 90s, for some reason, there was this mentality that went around leadership that was kind of this fake it till you make it. And if you make a mistake, don't ever actually acknowledge it, just kind of manage through it. And the problem is that is a great way to drive out trust in relationships. If you're human, and if you're on this call today, I would expect you are, you're going to make mistakes. And when people apologize for their mistakes and show that they're human as well, we can relate to that. What we can't relate to is somebody who thinks they're perfect and is unwilling to admit when they're wrong. The last piece here on righting wrongs is doing the right thing and not just the easy thing. And there is a difference. Sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do. And earlier we talked about integrity, but a piece that kind of gets thrown interchangeably and it's different. Character is about doing the right things. Integrity is about doing what you say you're going to do. And so sometimes the things that we need to do are hard, but we can't shy away from them just because they're hard. So for example, if I need to talk to someone about a performance issue, that's hard. Most of us don't sign up or raise our hand for that because we know there's going to be discomfort for them and for us, and we're not sure how it's going to go. But the truth of the matter is that's the right thing to do. If I want somebody to be successful, I'm going to share with them what I'm seeing, what I think needs to be improved, and maybe the route to get there. But if I take the easy route, I'm not setting them up for success. I'm setting them up for failure. And I'm not thinking about them as a person instead of just a part of a process or a part of the team that's not really necessary. So step into that. Don't shy away from it. Do the right thing, even when it's hard. All right, so we've covered 5 today. I told you there are 13, but I want you to think about a relationship right now in your work, potentially even in your personal life, where trust has been strained or it's been completely broken. And I want you to share which one of these 5 would most impact that relationship for the better. So is it demonstrate respect, clarify expectations, talk straight, keep commitments, or right wrongs? And Kylie, I think we've got a poll. Could we stand that up? Or actually, maybe I can do that. So if you want to use the poll just to vote here, I'd be interested to see which of these 5 do you think would most impact that relationship for the better? Let's see what you come up with. All right, so it looks like pretty close there. Talking straight, just making sure that that we're giving them the right information, making sure that we're being honest, and then righting wrongs. I'll be honest with you, I've been doing a lot of coaching here over the last 3 months, and righting wrongs tends to be one of the ones that comes up a fair amount, where a leader has glossed over maybe a misstep that they've made, but they've gone out and really coached their team members on mistakes that they're making. And because of it, it's created some rifts. It's created some problems that have kind of flared up in other ways. And so While I think all of these are important, and if you come back in January and listen to all 13 of them, you're going to see that they're interrelated. I can specifically speak to the righting wrongs right now as being an issue that we've seen. So with that in mind, I would love to see if you've got any questions. I would love for you to drop those in the chat. I don't know, Kylie, if there's any that have come in that I missed.
So you've gotten some feedback throughout the presentation today, some things that really resonated with the group. Sorry guys, my chat is jumping around here. It was really liking the I want you to be successful. So as a discussion lead-in, that really resonated with Meg. And Wendy also really liked that I want you to be successful. Let's see what else we got here. Another comment that really resonated with the group was, what questions do you have? Approach and being able to use that just to help get the conversation going. So if you guys have any questions for Joel, or if you've had a situation, this is a great time to go ahead and ask our expert. I'm going to give you guys just a quick moment here to get those in the chat box. For our Facebook Live viewers, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to bring Joel in-house, feel free to call us at Corporate Training, or if you want to learn how you can still join the FIT, which is the Flexible and Innovative Training Series, feel free to shoot us an email at corporatetraining@kirkwood.edu. So for Facebook Live viewers, thank you so much. We're glad to have you join us. And if you'd like to participate in the Q&A in the future, you just have to register to join via Zoom. All right. So Joel, one of the things that I really liked that you mentioned was righting our wrongs and just admitting we're all human. We've all made mistakes, and just taking that moment to own our stuff and just have that moment to just say, yes, I'm sorry that I said this thing or that this happened, and giving it a space, especially I think after COVID and all of the changes everyone's faced in the workforce. In hindsight, I think all of us have opportunities that we can say, you know what, I should have handled that differently now that I know everything I know now.
Yeah, and the potential for miscommunication right now with a number of people working from home, utilizing things like Teams or Slack or Zoom to have conversations. It's really easy to say something in some way that somebody may take wrong, right? And sometimes you just have to be able to say, hey, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. It came across wrong. Again, I'm going to go back to, we're not looking for perfect people. And in fact, when people act like they're perfect, they're the people we relate to the least. And we probably trust the least. And so being able to say, hey, I made a mistake. I apologize. Will you forgive me? That's about as personal as that we can get with somebody else. And at the end of the day, if they're not willing to forgive or they're not willing to overlook the mistake, you've done what you can to repair it. And I think that's important in the trust process.
Yeah, that was something when you were presenting, just how much trust is really based on communication. And, you know, and I love your comment there about we don't have to be perfect, and it's okay. So Meg, thank you so much, Meg, for your participation today. And she agreed. She said our current environment makes, in her opinion, building trust more important than ever. Yeah, it's been tough. These have been tough times for a lot of folks for a lot of different reasons. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of that, Joel, too, with the trust conversation and all of the changes.
Yeah, and it's been hard. We've had teams that have been hiring folks for the last 6 months, and they've never seen each other face to face. And so it is hard to build trust when you can't see the whites of somebody's eyes or interact with them. I see a couple of questions here. I'm just going to jump in on, if that's okay, Kylie. So best ways to talk straight to an intimidating or manipulative coworker. Well, first, I'll be completely honest, this is hard because part of the intimidation and the manipulation, those two things already erode trust with you. But sometimes part of this can be about clarifying your intent, making sure that you're clear. But the other piece is to let them know how they're impacting you, right? Do they recognize that the way the actions they're taking, the ways they speak to you, the ways they work with you, it feels like they're trying to intimidate you or manipulate you. And to be able to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm feeling. I'm not sure if that's why you're doing that or if you're intending to do it that way, but I want to make sure that we're clear. Those are that your actions are doing this, and that they're eroding the trust that we have. That's going to be a hard conversation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And sometimes you may need to bring other people in on it to help you have that conversation, whether that's your supervisor, whether that's a trusted colleague that both of you work with, so that they understand the impact of what they're doing. Jessica, are the components expressed today considered a two-way street? Leaders and non-leaders follow the same rules? Absolutely. Trust is universal. And so the ways that leaders earn our trust, coworkers earn our trust, spouses earn our trust, are very much the same. And so we don't have the time to go into it today, but there's a lot of this that's based in neuropsychology and brain science. And our body actually reacts to certain signals in a way that creates distrust, that we don't trust people because we think they don't care about us, that they won't help us, those types of things. And so we push them off. And so some of just understanding that that's our natural, that's the way our body is wired, how our brain is wired. If we think of this as just a leadership piece or it's just a personal piece, we miss the point that we're all human. And if we interact as humans, we need to understand the impact of what we say, what we do, and how we interact with other people.
Very good. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. I know it's tough to find time in our busy schedules for these webinars, so thank you so much. And Joel, thank you for your time this morning as well and helping us learn more about building trust. I just want to take another moment here and say, if you would like to bring Joel in-house on this topic or any other topic, or join the FIT training series and do a deeper dive on this topic with Joel, feel free to give corporate training a call at 319-398-5623, or you can email us at corporatetraining@kirkwood.edu. Again, thank you all for joining us and for your fantastic feedback and questions today. Joel, again, thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone has a fantastic day.